Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about The Chair Company, the Tim Robinson series that recently wrapped its first 8-episode season on HBO Max. There is a lot going on with this show, and I'm glad to have two guests to help unpack it. First, costume designer Nicky Smith. Nicky, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. Also glad to welcome cinematographer Ashley Connor. Ashley, glad you could join us.
Thanks for having us. It's great.
All right. Well, this is a very interesting series. We have a lot to talk about. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. To start us out, how did both of you get involved with this production?
The pilot director, Andrew DeYoung, and I have known each other for quite a few many years, and we'd never worked together. And I think when they knew the show was coming to New York and they were looking at New York DPs, he put my name in. And, kind of from there, we went through normal channels. Like I made a pitch deck, I pitched my ideas. And from there, Andy was able to pitch me to the guys. And then we kind of had a larger meeting with them.
I went a little bit of a different route. My agent is a huge fan of Tim Robinson. She came to set and totally freaked out because she's obsessed with him. And she was like, his comedy run. I was like, yeah, of course, I've heard of him. And she's like, you really should submit for this. I think it would be great. And it was many steps of talking to the line producer and then finally got to meet with Andy. And it's similar to Ashley in that once you meet with Andy, then they kind of pitch you to the guys as the larger meeting. And it was one of those things where you're talking to these guys that have worked on SNL that have so much history with comedy. And for them to be like, oh, you actually understand the world that we're creating. It felt very connected and kind of synergy from start.
Well, I should just add, I had watched all of Tim and Zach's stuff. I was already a fan. So it was I'm a big I Think You Should Leave fan. So when this came across, it was like, oh, this is the holy grail of where I want to go.
Well, let's talk more about the world they're creating. If people are familiar with I Think You Should Leave, the show that Tim and Zach had done before, there's a peculiarity to their humor that's very much evident in The Chair Company. But also The Chair Company has this normalcy that has to thread through. And at the same time, there is definitely weird stuff going on. This just feels like a balancing act. And I'm curious about, for both of you, working with those guys and trying to walk this high wire of a show. How?
I think from my perspective, they come from a heavy sketch background. And I don't think that the show doesn't have sketch elements, but creating a more singular narrative through line was something that was really important. And I think part of that was the design of the entire arc of the series and the season, specifically to kind of build towards and allow for the more surreal elements to be present. So when we were talking about establishing the pilot, things we talked about a lot were taking the image and Ron seriously, kind of going a more dramatic route, and really making grounding him and the stakes of what he's willing to risk for this obsession to feel based in a reality. And then from there, it was easy to say, well, from there, anything is possible. So we knew that we had to hit certain tonal markers in order to keep it possible that certain people could enter the normal narrative. And I think that was working our way up to a fever pitch. It was very much about matching Ron's emotional journey throughout the season so that the finale could kind of go off the rails a little bit. And, there is a normal element to making the show, which is you get the pilot, you get to read the pilot. We did the pilot before it got, it was pilot, and then the series got picked up and they wrote the series. So I think that the boys always they knew what they were going to do, but they didn't know the specifics of every single detail when we were making the pilot. But they could clue us into like tonally where this season would take us. And it felt so expansive. And yeah, just we wanted to be able to keep the door open for all possibilities to exist, starting in the pilot.
I think from the costume point of view, it was very much like treat it like you're doing a crime conspiracy drama, in that the clothes are super mundane. They're very much about like the character and the person. It's not about comedy. We take everything very seriously. And so it allows the space, like Ashley was saying, to put these pockets of surrealism in it because you believe it can happen because it's a world that you relate to. If it was a hyper realized world, you would expect all that stuff and it wouldn't have the punch that those moments have. You just be like, oh yeah, I expect some weird guy to walk in. They're doing weird stuff. But if it's like a very, poignant class, like a life of the party class, like we want to help people to be more socially aware, and then, the weirdness happens there, then it really adds to the depth of the story. So we all took it very seriously. We're all like doing research and making sure that, if they're supposed to be a lawyer, they look like a lawyer. Like it was a lot of that from the costume and the visual elements.
Talk to me first about the production. Ashley, you mentioned that they shot in New York. Give me a sense of when you did this filming and kind of how much of a production schedule you guys had.
The pilot we did in the summer of 2024, and it had a pretty standard pilot schedule, like 5 weeks prep or 6 weeks prep and 1.5 week shoot. We started prep on the series like in March 2025 and wrapped production like the second week of July. And it's a comedy type schedule, it's a comedy type budget, which means like 6 day episodes plus 1 or 2 days here and there. I mean, as the season kind of took shape and some of the more action elements became apparent, it was impossible to sort of, and car driving and all this stuff, it was very impossible to make, I think, a 6 day schedule.
The pilot was super lean for every department. It was, how can we not cut corners, but like really multiply like the little dollars we have and really make it look big and beautiful and all of that. And I think we kind of developed a way to do it in the pilot. So when we got the series, we already had basically the formula of how to take a dollar and make it into like $10. And that's kind of like where the series kind of builds, is that you can see the team working together in how they made the production work so that at the end, when you get those real surreal moments again, it's worth your bang for your buck.
That idea that they just did the pilot and hadn't written out the whole show, but knew where they were going. The whole show carries itself. And again, it's a balancing act all the way through. What are you deciding about the look of this show? The things you're establishing that this is how we're going to tell this story that keeps it grounded, but leaves room for these other elements.
Andy and I were really inspired by like 70s and 80s thrillers, kind of like classic Sidney Lumet and Alan Pakula, and these long zooms and these big dollies. And I think when I have done similarly budgeted comedies, a lot of that is not on the table. And structurally, a lot of comedy is based around kind of improvisation, and the boys really don't improvise. So we knew the scripts were kind of the scripts and the words were the words, which for us meant that we could design kind of some more aggressive coverage. And we were always aiming for it to not just be typical cross, and to kind of more be emotionally placed through the camera with Ron and where he's at in his journey. So for me, from like a cinematography perspective, I always knew where to start my coverage from. I knew kind of how to base the coverage because it felt very perspectively bound to Ron's experience. And that kind of allowed us to lose certain shots at certain points and really kind of hone in on what needed to be told to the audience by the shots. So when his world is kind of crashing down on him, when you're sort of seeing him process, we wanted the camera work to energetically match that. So that was kind of the trick of the season, and really talking to my crew and really creatively engaging my crew to be like, I want to be on dollies all the time. I want aggressive camera work. I want zooms. I want it a little dirty. a little rough around the edges. To me, that kind of gives something a little bit more life. I think there's this desire now for like technical perfection, and that's just something I'm not interested in. I really wanted it to feel like there was a friction between what we were trying to capture and that which we couldn't. And to me, that's an expansive pushing element to the cinematography, and I always wanted to feel like we were trying to catch up to him. We're trying to be there, and I wanted it to match tonally there.
Yeah, I watched that episode 8 a second time, noticing more of the camera work, the slow zooms you're talking about with some of the conversations and a lot of camera movement. But it speaks, I think, to the way it works for the show is that I didn't really notice it the first time through because it's adding to the feeling without being distracting. Kudos. I was really impressed.
That's the best thing that you could ever tell me.
And I think, Nicky, it's a similar challenge on the costume side. Please say more about you're playing into this world, but you don't want to distract from the ordinary or the insane as it happens.
I think one of the ways that we did that was really using a lot of thrifted items, things that had stains on them, things that looked dirty, things that weren't perfect. Again, leading to what Ashley said, like there is this desire to have this beautiful stylized world when it comes to TV this day. And it kind of, it's not to detract from that in any way, because I love those shows as much as anyone else. But for this show particularly, it needed to have that like level of grime and kind of dirt on it. And I think we did that with, we didn't always steam the clothes, like especially if it was supposed to be nighttime wear, we'd wash it a couple times in Cascade to break it down to make it look older. It was really making sure that clothes looked lived in and nothing looked brand new, because brand new is a different story. And we're telling a story about middle class family in America that rewear the same shoes, rewear the same pants. And it was a lot of like when designing the character, making sure that the closet matched the character and not having super fancy pants for Tim just because it's Tim. It's like he was wearing Dockers from J.C. Penney, like 3 sizes too big, really pleated pants, like things that are just unattractive. And it was like, how can we pick colors that actually make people look worse? And making Lake Bell look like a sad entrepreneur mom, but like, a mom who's not like living her most fashionable life was a challenge unto itself, because you have this gorgeous woman and they're like, how can we take her down so that she becomes Barb and less like the love interest that we all expect Lake Bell to be. So it's really like taking our actors and kind of reshaping them in a way that feels very mundane, very approachable, very middle America.
I know it would be my favorite part is like whenever we would
The
come to
shoes.
everybody would come to set for rehearsal, and like Tim is honestly, I dress pretty butch, and like basically Tim's world is like the only thing I want to wear at all times. So anytime he showed up with like, where'd you get those pants from? Where'd you get that shirt from? And just like Google, you know, great style, incredible style. And Lake is like equally as awesome. And she'd just show up wearing the coolest outfits, and then they'd get sent away, and then they'd come back with like she'd be wearing like Talbots and
Yeah.
both ugliest shoes you've ever seen in your life.
I love those
The
shoes.
transformation was incredible, and it was always like, oh, I meant, I love it. I loved it.
Now, sometimes when I'm talking to costume designers, and so Nicky, this question's for you. There's a discussion about how what the actor brings to the character and the sort of back and forth with you have with them in realizing the character. It feels to me a show like this, again, with this balance that they're trying to maintain and sort of this trust in Tim and Zach's vision. Maybe there's less room for the actors to bring something particular, or does that still play, but in a different way with this kind of challenge?
Well, for me as a costume designer, I always allow the actors to bring their comfort to it. So in fittings, I won't photograph something if they're like, it's so uncomfortable. I cannot wear this for 6 hours. I'm going to scratch my eyes out. I don't want that. I want when people go to set that they're happy, they're comfortable. So Ashley can get her take. So we're not waiting on, to change the skirt because we thought it worked and now it didn't. So there's really a lot of, if you don't like it, I'm not going to photograph it. So whatever Tim and Zach pick, it's things that the actor and I agree work for the character. They feel comfortable. They can do what they need to do. So whatever shows up on the day, most people are like, oh, they like that? Cool. All right, let's get into it. That sort of idea. Because again, I think actors have a role to play in that. I don't have to be on camera. So my stakes in it are, how do I make you look like you can do the job, feel comfortable to do the job, and make sure that Tim and Zach's vision is achieved?
Similar thoughts, Ashley, when you're talking about the cinematography. You talked about a lot of the camera work reflecting where we are with Ron. It's fair to say that Ron is our guide through this world. Do you use different techniques with different people, or really are we anchored in Ron's world pretty much throughout?
I'm pretty anchored in Ron's world. There's very few times where like we broke perspective, or not break perspective, but like go away from being with Ron. So there wasn't massive differences, but I would say that like understanding how we were going to visualize Ron in a scene, like there's a phone call in episode 8 where Jeff calls him and is trying to ask him to come back to work, and you shoot one half of the call and then you shoot the other half. And so I was very happy that we got to do Tim's side first so that I could see where we were going with the zooms, with the coverage, with the sort of glass reflection, and kind of that's a moment in the we're always push and pulling, right? Like Tim is or Ron is dragging us forward with the narrative, and then there's a moment where we really want to like stop and watch him and see how he's processing and where he becomes kind of impenetrable. And in those moments, we wanted the camera to kind of step back and let you just watch him process.
Uh-huh.
And that phone call is kind of a big example of that, where you're on edge. You're on edge. He's writing such a fine line. And for us, that meant mimicking that, reflecting that back, or challenging that through the cinematography. And I felt like it was really fun to kind of have those conversations with Andy DeYoung and Aaron Schimberg, the directors, and just kind of be like, well, where do we want to take this right now? And the other part, I wouldn't call the show experimental, but I come from an experimental filmmaking background. And so it's always kind of ingrained in my process, this idea of experimentation, this idea of failure. And it was so fun working with all the guys because they were so willing to kind of fail on a TV show that's really difficult, but it created this unique creative space where if something didn't feel right, if it didn't feel like it was working photographically, I would do something like do a take where I just shook the camera the entire time and zoomed in and out and did whatever it was. And a lot of that is not in the show, but it would just kind of reinvigorate the crew, reinvigorate my operators, reinvigorate the moment to be like, okay, we need to energetically match this better. It was just a really fun space for me to get really creative on and feel like I could strike out and there was a landing pad and I wasn't gonna get fired.
Well, you mentioned earlier there's a low budget comedy. And I think I can presume one of the advantages of that is that you don't have 6 studio execs sitting at a video village questioning every decision that's being made.
I think honestly, I'm not, HBO has been incredible and so supportive, and like the producers, everybody, everybody wants to complain about budget. It's very easy to complain about budget, but I never felt like I didn't have the tools I needed to tell the story we needed to tell. Yes, I had to get more creative. And to me, it's like I've done almost $100 million show. I've done big budget shows where I can have every techno crane, I can have every light, I can have every lift. I can the morning of and be like, I need this piece of gear, and it comes. And that is really fun and that is really great. And I love doing that. But when the opposite is presented and I'm really creatively aligned with what the show, I was really creatively aligned with what the show wanted to do. And that to me, I just would tell my crew, I was like, if you're going to complain that you don't have X, Y, or Z, then this is not the show for you. Because I'm asking you to cut off your left hand and then see what only your right hand can do. And if you want to join me on this journey, if you want to say, that's okay, I don't need that, it's like you can light with the biggest units in the world and you can light with nothing. So there's beautiful work to be had across all the boards. So I was just very clear with my crew that if they were going to sign up to do this with me, then it couldn't be about what we didn't have. It had to be about celebrating what we did. And sometimes that meant pulling every damn light off the truck and every single unit. And, sometimes it meant we'd fight for a 20K and we'd get it. And, it was fun.
Actually, when you were talking earlier about the conversation between Ron and Jeff, his boss, Jeff played by Lou Diamond Phillips. In the beginning, he's the archetype snarky boss. By the time we get to the end, he's out in the desert with his friends. We're seeing more of his sort of internal thinking. Talk to me about his arc.
I would say there's clearly a big difference in just the wardrobe because we see him in the office, and that's where we're introduced to Jeff. And there's a hierarchy that Jeff has over everyone in that he wears really nice tailored suits. They're, great thread crown, beautiful pocket square. There's really the illusion of Jeff has all the money, Jeff has it together. And then when we see him outside of that, we start to see Jeff is not the top of the social pyramid. And how does that look when Jeff's sitting by other people who also have nice leather jackets and also can afford the best whiskey? How does that change? So it was really like kind of expanding his world, making it more casual, but still being that kind of billionaire boys club casual, and knowing that Jeff is on the lower rung, especially in Sedona, you can kind of see it when he's sitting, but some of the other guys, like the one guy has his shirt open, Danny Donovan is showing you chest and like hair's looking really great. It's very easy to see how Jeff is on the low rung of the billionaire boys club. And then again, when he's at the karaoke bar, the other guy's like, yeah, I just came from London, I did this. And you're like, Jeff, your friends are actually pretty cool. So I think that's one of the things that Tim and Zach really kind of from early on were like, we're going to expand Jeff. We don't know how, just buckle up and see where it goes.
I also think that it's such a testament to Tim and Zach's writing and how they designed and how they approach character work. And I think that this comes from sketch background. Like they're really good at creating just a complete character who shows up for one scene, and you can sense like an internal backstory, like the guy at the door begging for Beatles memorabilia, like the Tamblays guy, like everybody who kind of showed up just felt so lived in, and that they were a character. They were a fully fledged character. And I love that. And every time coming to set, it was so fun to see what man was picked and what they'd be wearing and who they'd be. And they just came with like such bravado, and they're so good at casting.
Yes.
And I think that meant that no one felt small. Everyone came and they felt like somebody to be treated as an important part. And sometimes, you'd see a character, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but you see a character and you'd be like, oh my God, that guy's so funny. He's like, oh yeah, he's back. This is what he's doing later on, like down the line, we have for him. And you're like, what? That guy? Like, he is so fun. And again, that's a testament to their world building skills. And like, I was just so impressed that the world felt, and people talk about Twin Peaks. I love Twin Peaks, but I think that the sort of emotional connection between these two worlds is like all these characters feel real and of the world.
I want to jump off what Ashley said about casting really quick. Like their casting for a costume designer was difficult in that different body types, different heights, different, everything. Like there was no one person that looked like anyone else. So it's like, how do you create these people to not look like a stereotype, but actually look as the real person? And that really is a testament to Tim and Zach. Even the way they cast The Office, like it looks like a real office. It has the diversity that you would expect from a city in Ohio. It has, the different socioeconomic stats, even the different ages that you would see with Douglas and Doris being like older. And then you have like Jamie, who's young and cute. And like, how do you have all those people live in the world together? So again, it's the storytelling and the casting that really kind of make the show the thing that it is.
Well, one character I want to invite you guys to go deeper on, spoilers welcome, is Mike Santini. He starts out, all he is a shirt, but obviously he is a character that has this arc through the series that again goes completely left field come episode 8.
For me with the wardrobe, I didn't want him to look like a stereotypical gangster. I really wanted him to look like the type of guy who bets on the ponies and has been doing it for a really long time. Like probably goes to casino on Wednesday for like the shrimp meal, like that kind of guy who's like down on his luck and is looking for a break. So the shirt that everyone loves from the pilot was, just like a cheap shirt that we could find multiples of. And the guys were like, this is great, it's perfect, but it's too bright. So I sent Ashley a text and I was like, listen, what do I need to do to make this shirt work? And she's like, just dye it, just like make it a little bit darker. So I sent her the shirt after. She's like, that's perfect, that's great. Working with a DP who you can send photos and the response is, that's perfect, that's great. That is every costume designer's dream and kind of like the foundation of a great collaboration, like truly, truly. But back to Joe, who plays Mike Santini, it was really one of those things where I wanted to make sure that he always had like worn clothes that were thrifted, clothes that were secondhand. So we did a lot of goodwill for him. Like he's kind of stuck in that late 90s, early 2000s where he's just like, I love this leather jacket. It was great then, it's great now. And kind of making sure that his wardrobe felt stagnant. So when he developed as a character, it was kind of unexpected that he would go this route because there were no like fancy shirts, there was nothing fancy to kind of say Mike is going to become this guy. It was all very much like sad guy at the racetrack. No one knows what he's going to do.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Joe is such an amazing guy. I love Joe's story. Like Joe's like a New York actor, like
Yes.
he's been in like all the spit parts. And then just to watch him over the season, just kind of, I mean, he's like in his own skin, but I was just like, this is about to be like a massive
Yeah.
for you. I loved him so much, and I love the character of Mike. I always had to remind myself, like, Mike's a bad guy.
Yeah. Even Tim would say that to me. He's like, remember, Mike's the bad guy. Ashley's right.
He's a bad guy, but I really, to me, I felt like there needed to be this love, there needed to be this desire to be with him, and this pull. Because I think Ron has this pull, this desire, like the darkness keeps kind of dragging him in, and it's like literally the guy being like, I'm getting out of it. And it's like, no, you're not. And like dragging him. You have to believe that like he wants to push the darkness off. He doesn't want to keep going, but he just keeps getting dragged back in. He just one more cookie crumb and he goes after it. And that was kind of the fun of the season, was to watch him continually fight that instinct. And Mike's a big proponent of that. He's a propulsive element to the show. Again, they would always be like, Mike's a psychopath. He's crazy. And I remember when we were talking about putting the mayor's friend in the bathtub and like what that scene had to look like. It's like, no, like we really have to show that like Mike is willing to go there.
Yeah.
Mike's the strong arm, like he is this character. And as it sort of gets revealed in episode 8, I don't know what's going to happen in season 2, but I find the stakes are really interesting and elevated to sort of see where Ron is about to go with all these people. And again, Joe is like a character you just can't, like Mike, you can't help but just love him. He's just a lovable dum dum who's like a lot of mistakes in this world, and kind of you see him really struggling. And I found that to be really emotional too, like really struggling with his identity as this bad guy. And that was definitely shaped through the season, like him kind of wanting to do better and not wanting to be Scrooge. He wants to be a likable guy.
I feel like that's a character that's almost a Fight Club scenario where if you watch it the second time and you're like, oh no, this is where he's going and what is actually going on behind the scenes,
Hmm.
it's much creepier than on the first watch where you do get this sort of redemption arc that you're like, oh no, that is not his role in the show at all. I want to ask you guys about a sequence in episode 5, and that's the bar where Mike and Ron go to meet the actor. And yeah, I feel like up till now we've been playing with little bits, but this is the first time that things, it feels like, really get out of control.
I mean, that to me, when I read episode 5, sometimes you get the script and you get to read it and you're suddenly like, are y'all fucking serious? Like, this is like,
Same reaction.
I remember reading it and being like, so we're doing all this in episode 5. And they're like, yeah. You know, working with Aaron Schimberg, who's like such a talented director, and he's so amazing. And I love his films and I love his brain. But like there were some things like he hadn't done TV before, and I knew what it was going to take to make episode 5 land. And I just told him, I was like, you have to trust me. It's not going to feel good. It's going to feel crazy. I did a lot of the hand work myself. And, you know, like when they're chasing each other, that's the last hour of a day of me sprinting up and down corridors and going through the mattresses and just grabbing my other camera operator and be like, go to the end of the tunnel, get to the corner and just turn the corner. And we're like trying to piece this all together. That episode's like Alice in Wonderland to me. You know, like every door opens to a new world and a new person and then just a new question that you're like, I did not see this coming. And to me, it was just so fun to play with that trope and to just really go as hard as I could. That meant designing it to be like starting kind of normal and then quickly deteriorating and then just really letting the camera just get really crazy. And yeah, I remember just kind of being like, I got this one. Don't worry. I'm going to run around as much as humanly possible and we will get it. By the time you get to the explosion, you're like, I don't know what I just witnessed, but it was something.
Same. Like as soon as we got the script, I went to the line producer and I was like, stunts, money. Like that's all I can tell you. Because every action sequence that you see has a stunt person who needs multiples to be the other side of it. So some of the people we were able to actually cast stunt actors as the roles, which was really wonderful. Like the girlfriend was an amazing stunt actor. The pole climber was actually a real pole climber. Like, so they also brought their expertise. So when you're in a fitting with a stunt person, I'm always like, can you do what you need to do in this shoe? Will you be safe? Can your harness fit under it? So we would have them bring in their harnesses, bring in their paddings, bring in their rigs, so we could have it in the fitting to make sure when they got to set, everything fit, everything worked, and we had multiples so we can take as many takes as needed within the budget to make sure that we could do it correctly. I would say like everything starting at the bar, kind of mundane, kind of relaxed, was really the best way to kind of like make the whole world explode as soon as the chase happens. And so it's really like, how can you make the bar feel so mundane that when they say it's a Coke bar, you're like, wait, really? Like, so once that starts, then you're like, wait, what? So then I think the audience is kind of like looking for the things that are the tells. And there are no tells for the costume. It's all like the acting coach who lives in Oliver Pablo's bedroom is just like a lovely acting coach that we put in like the saddest sweatshirt with flowers. It's always like, how can we make these people look like they really do live here? They've been here for months squatting. The drug dealer with those awful white pants that got the stain on it. It was really like those pants do not fit great. They don't look wonderful. Like a black, it's always like, what's the thing that doesn't look wonderful? And it's kind of like a little ill-fitted. So I think in that whole sequence, you're seeing blurs of color, blurs of shapes, blurs of silhouettes. That's actually, I want to say, one of my favorite sequences in the whole series because it's every department working together from the art department to costumes to acting to hair and makeup to making sure the stunts and the principal actors look exactly alike so that there's no real tell when it switches in between the two to the amazing work that Ashley and her team did. It's like that's the joy of filmmaking, like that's the joy of TV is creating weirdness that excites the audience and excites the crew to make it.
Another scene I want to ask you about is kind of it might be described as the opposite, but I'm curious what you bring similarly to the conclusion of episode 7 at the dinner party. We have a lot of folks dressed up. Again, seems very traditional, pretty large scale for TV. I think there's a lot of people there, a lot of costuming, a lot of background. And then you get these confrontation in Alice's office. Talk to me about wrapping up episode 7.
I think episode 7 was, again, really fun to do something we hadn't done. We hadn't done a dinner party of that standard, of that caliber. So getting dresses that felt fancy, but it felt Ohio appropriate fancy, like you're not going to go to the Bloomingdale's, you may go to Kohl's, like making sure that everyone was on par with the correct socioeconomic status. And then you have Alice, who's kind of like the queen bee, but still keeping her within the range of the world. And also, I think one of the things that we thought about is color, like not wanting it to feel bright and fun and excited, trying to keep it in like a really tight tonal color palette where there's a lot of grays and navies and dark tones. So when things take a turn, like you kind of feel the whole thing is a little bit off from the beginning. Even when Lake arrives at the house, like it's not as glamorous as you would think it would be, but it's clearly glamorous to Ron and to Barb. Like they're clearly impressed by all of it. But when you look closely, like again, the suits are okay. The ties are okay. The dresses are all right. There's like, some cute little purses in there, but nothing's really like so fancy for them to be blown away. And then when you have the sequence in Alice's office, I want to give a shout out again to the art department. Like they dressed that office in such a magnificent way that, I mean, all she needed to do was stand there. And like, she's an amazing actress in her own, but like that's all she needed to do. Cause it just like you felt like you were in this whirl of like, what is she doing? What are these photos? What are these files? And like, how does it all exist and interplay together? So I think, again, it was one of those things where we got to do something fun that we didn't get to normally do as a department, but how it all came together at the end was beautifully creepy. That's the only way to kind of describe it.
I think Jason Singleton, the production designer, and his team, they did such an amazing job. Again, limited resources, limited things, but they kind of took that house and really shaped it into what it needed to accomplish.
Yeah.
And we knew that that room was going to be a very special space to exist in, and just wanted it to really kind of like immediately throw you into like, what the fuck is this room? Like you have such, especially with a show that moves this quickly, you have little time to kind of express something very clearly and succinctly. And I felt like they did such a good job of like, you walk in there and immediately you feel like you've entered a new world, a different space. And then that room existed at the house. They like dressed it a lot and a lot of work on it, but that room was physically like, it wasn't a stage build. Yeah, I think I find that kind of relationship to like good location scouting, great production design, great costuming,
Yep.
it allows for more creative choices. Like there's a shot in there that has a mirror kind of reflected back on everybody, and that was a really fancy mirror that existed at the house that we weren't allowed to move. And I was like, don't move it. I don't want it moved. I want to use it. And they did such a tremendous job there, really just making that scene work.
Well, that scene and that episode ends with Ron in a relatively good place where we could have just wrapped and said, "Oh, that's our story." Honestly, had no idea what was going to come with episode 8, and just to confound me even further, we open episode 8 with this wedding sequence that seems to have no connection. We see none of our characters, and it goes on for a while. Talk to me about the wedding sequence and what you do when you get this script and you're like, who are these people?
The wedding was no joke. It was a big undertaking across every department because, again, we hadn't done anything like that. So it's like sourcing all of these dresses, sourcing the bridesmaid dresses. And I think Ashley and Aaron kind of sat down and figured out what are the key moments that we need to see. So then from there, they're like, we really want to focus on the wedding dress. We want to focus on this, like the flowers. So it kind of gave costumes and art, like these are the things that have to, kind of be 100%. Everything else can get by with like 80, 90% because they're going to be in the background. And Art came up with a really beautiful color palette. Again, shout out to Jason and his crew. And we just kind of took that and expanded it for the bridesmaids, for our groomsmen, and just wanted to make sure that everyone looked good. So we normally don't do any BG fittings, but we fit everyone, including the mother of the bride, all the bridesmaids, all the groommen. We had like mini fittings for the DJ, like all of those people, the bartender, because they're so closely situated to our principles and so closely situated to what the story was without our principles that they had to look equally on par. And then you have our kid, our lone gunman, who just really need to look like a kid. Like there need to be no giveaway that he had anything else to do but to like show up and maybe like get some leftovers. Like you have no clue what this kid is bringing to it until he pulls out his 3D printed gun and then like lets the bullets fly, which is again totally unexpected. And I would say that blood rig with Stacy Crystal was kind of fun to do, to get shot and then have the blood kind of like appear on the wall behind him and then he slides down was really fun to kind of figure out like how do we do that with special effects? Where do we put the blood rig, making sure that the jacket and the shirt did all the things that it needed to do. But I would say across the board, the wedding was a massive, massive undertaking and it paid off. Like, I think it really throws the audience off the scent of where the finale is going to go in a good way, in a surprising
Yeah, I think doing like a cold open, I think that's what I like,
way.
we wanted to like play with certain pastiche, the whole like wedding opening sequence. You've got it, but like kind of do it our own way. And, it's almost that sequence, but a little bit not, and a little bit grosser. And, it was just so fun to kind of read that and have it. I try to like replicate an experience of reading the script, which like at first I was like, oh, is this Natalie's wedding? And that's what you're supposed to think. And, like
Right.
we don't really play that joke that long, but immediately you should be like, oh, is this the wedding that they've been talking about all season? And then it kind of takes you out of it. And that sequence I just found so funny. And like the actors that they got to do, Stacey Crystals and the dad, the father of the bride, it was just so funny to me and made me laugh. In those kinds of circumstances, you really want like them to speak for themselves and not overshadow anything. And it was just really about like letting the moment play. And I thought it set up the final episode like, where are we going now? Because I think that that's what I loved about it. Like you get to the end of episode 7, and you're kind of like, okay, you figured some stuff out. Where do we go from here?
Well, and episode 8 continues to zig and zag. I'm also reminded and want to hear your thoughts about the dog, which shows up somewhat inexplicably. I think it's just the episode before, maybe 2 episodes before, but he brings a dog home. Again, just an aside, like, why is this going? And then we meet the dog's original owner. By this point, you're always wondering who's going to matter and who's not going to matter going forward at this. Talk to me about the dog, the owner, the shape in the shed, the demon face. Again, if someone hasn't seen this show, they got to think, what the fuck are they talking about by now? But yes, all of this stuff comes together around this dog.
I think to me, I had to approach episode 8 like there's no joke, and it is real. And I think that to me was very important to like understanding where Ron is at and his subconscious, and regardless of whether or not like the monster man is a real monster, if it's in his head and Ron's hit his head too many times, it kind of didn't matter. It like needed to emotionally land and to feel real within that moment and in that space. And Amanda's boyfriend at the end of the episode, we're sort of building up and setting up for a season 2. And to me, there was like a calming. You sort of like exhale a little bit, and then it really needed to get turned back up. And yeah, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they wrote it out, but to me, it just felt like a whole progression. Like, of course we're going here. Of course we're like, there's almost like a fairy tale element to like going up to the house and like finding the man and dropping off the dog. It's speaking on cerebrally in like a different kind of abstract, weird way that the narrative logic might not totally add up, but I think like emotional logic, it makes sense to where Ron's at. And that to me felt important to kind of honor that.
I agree. I think I've never spoken enough to enough people about where is the panty? Like, do we have Amanda's panty? Like, there were so many questions. Like, do we have it? Is it the same one? I was like, yes, it's the same one. It's the one from the episode. Don't worry. It was one of the things, again, what Ashley was saying, like, how do we create this narrative so that emotionally you can go along the journey? And I think one of the things that we did is once Ron leaves Fisher Bay and he's not at the office, we kind of change his wardrobe. So he's like always perpetual Saturday dad, like going on this journey, driving around, like running into these kids in the previous episode. Like he's doing all this weird stuff but it's like we're seeing Ron outside of the office. So then I wanted to extend that realism that the office kind of has for him. So when the guy turns into the monster, shout out to the amazing special effects makeup artist that did that, Denthead and Amanda's boyfriend. When you see those moments, it's so unexpected because he's dressed like a regular guy. There's nothing that gives away anything. Maybe the shape, you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. That might be the only thing that you're like, okay, I don't get it. And then you turn around and you see that face. It's like, how do you keep these people like in the most mundane, non incentivized, not giving away anything wardrobe so that when the weird things happen, when the panties thrown on the floor, like you don't know what that guy's gonna do. He's just dressed in black. There's like nothing special, interesting about it. It's really like let's focus on the thing that's interesting, which is the face. So throughout the wardrobe, I'm trying to highlight what are the things we should be focusing on. For example, for Ron, when he's going through the journey through the forest, I wanted to pick a light color shirt. So wherever he was in the forest, you would be able to follow him and follow where he is, no matter how Ashley shot it. And the same thing when he wore the green, like that's his cool outfit, like the green shirt with the green pants, which is not at all cool in any world, but that's like his, like, I'm going out, like I'm ready to show people who the fuck I am look. And making sure that that kind of put him out of odds, like going back into Fisher Robe, but not being in his work clothes, but something that felt similar to work. So you're kind of confused, like, what is he doing when you find the secret drawer in the wall? Like that's a surprise. Like it's really trying to keep all the elements that are surprises and really pushing you along this emotional journey by keeping everything else pretty mundane.
I think that's an interesting commentary on those last scenes at the high school gym where we talk about meeting Amanda's boyfriend finally, unmasking him, the panties again make an appearance, but that there's not a lot going on there. The rest of it is, again, this intentionally mundaneness, but we've already escalated the weirdness as a feeling that it doesn't have to be weirder at the end to carry through. That was my impression anyway. It sounds like that was intentional on your parts as well.
For sure.
Like you can't do hat on hat, you know, like you really want to again, I always felt like the more real the show felt, the more that the comedy could play and the more that like the craziness could exist because you weren't, you know, the camera's not flipping on like a 360 axis. It's not trying too hard to like do all these things. It was like about observation and being there. And to me, it creates a different relationship to the character when you're not putting too much style on top of everything.
Well, not a spoiler to say that HBO has renewed the Chair Company for season two. What can you guys tell us about that? What sort of hints as far as where things might go? What do you guys know? What can you share with us?
Ron comes back. Honestly, we have no real clue. Like, that's the beauty of working on the show, that Tim and Zach are very to the chest with where they see the characters going. I would say there were some characters that they would say, like, this person's going to be important in season two, but that's it. And that doesn't give me anything. Just like make sure that the wardrobe's great, make sure we keep all the stuff they're going to be important. But even then, like, you don't know what the importance is because the story can go anyway. Like, are we going to follow Alice, Jeff? Like, who even knows who's the real bad guy? Even that to me, as someone who worked on the show, was a question mark at the end. Like, who is really the person that's on the Tekka board? Who's really like the person that connects Tekka? Is Stacy Crystal? Does he know Jeff? Like, how do they know each other? Like, you see the weird photo. Like, we have no clue. We would just be shooting things that we're like, I don't know how this plays into this, but Tim and Zach do. So we're gonna go ahead and do it. Like, they're like, we're gonna do a photo with this person and they'll be around next season. I was like, who is this person? I've never seen them before. They're in the photo, and that's all I know is that they'll be around next season.
People send me things on Reddit. People send me theories and fan theories, and they're like, is this it? Is this it? Journey and not necessarily the destination. And I feel like
Yep.
you can expect the world to get a lot bigger. And I think like this, what Tim and Zach are kind of, actually, I don't know, and I won't, you know, won't quote them, but from what I'm interpreting, they're really touching on this sort of like internet based obsession that exists now, and like the QAnon world, and like just people's aptitude for going down rabbit holes, and
Yeah.
what that means in their psychological state, that like they're willing to go to the depths of the internet. And I think Ron is willing to go to like the depths physically, which separates his journey. And he is somebody who's like dabbled in the internet, and now he's like in it. Yeah, season 2 is just going to get bigger, bigger, better, louder, more fun.
Hopefully bigger conspiracies. Like that's my hope, that the conspiracies get wilder, a little bit crazy. Cause like the fact that it starts with a chair fall at work, and then at the end you have Amanda's boyfriend saying Amanda can move things with her mind. Who knew that was gonna happen? Like even when I was reading it, I was like, Amanda can move things with her mind. Like when did that happen? It's like, it's all of those weird moments that even as we're reading the script, we're like, how is that gonna play? I see that.
Hey, well, that surprise guest. Your
So
daughter's joined us. Welcome to the show.
I might have to call it.
While we wait for season 2, what's next for each of you?
I have a movie coming out in the spring called Remarkably Bright Creatures. It stars Sally Field, and it's based on a book. And an octopus. Is there an octopus? She's deathly afraid of the CG octopus. But yeah, it's like a very heartwarming movie. Very different than my chair company work. Yeah.
I have a world premiere play at the Denver Center written by one of the main writers from Bass Reeves. And it's about this non-binary Black femme who goes on a killing rampage, basically as a former slave from South Texas to North Texas, to seek revenge on white people who have done her wrong.
Well, good luck with those projects. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. I will say that the more I talk about this show, the more I enjoy it. Really great having you guys here today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. This is so much fun.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. If you're new to the podcast, you should check out our archives, where there are now more than 275 past episodes for your listening enjoyment. You can peruse those on our website, belowtheline.biz, or wherever you get your podcasts. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you want to support us, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcasts. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.